of the aircraft windscreen. He tried to turn and follow, but it disappeared from view. Now, he says at the time he was banned by the Official Secrets Act. When he landed, he told a guy called Derek Dempster. Derek Dempster was the first editor of Flying Saucers Review and passed away recently. I had the pleasure of talking to Derek Dempster about this. And this is a classic case where Derek then brought it to the attention of Prince Philip's equerry, which was Sir Henry Chinnery, if I remember rightly, otherwise known as Chin Straps, as he was affectionately called by Derek. But then it's as I say, it's fairly clear that at that stage that Prince Philip would have learnt about this particular case. So we know that he saw initially 3 objects in the sky, and as James will say to you, in all the years of flying, and he's flown Spitfires and all the types of aircraft, he's never seen anything like that before or since. Right. John Hanson?
Oh yes, I'm with you, John. Sorry,
Now, I've been speaking to Richard D. Hall, who's interviewing me about haunted skies.
Yes.
I've told him about your sighting because for me personally, it really was the benchmark of what these books are all about. I know that you were stationed at RAF North Weald, Essex, near Epping, and that you were on a air test on the 14th of October 1954. You took off at about 4:15 and you noticed a number of contrails in the sky.
That's the first person that said that. All these other things, a lot of these things I've read, they sort of talk about a pair of aeroplanes, you know. But it was a gaggle of I assumed it was a gaggle of an exercise of some sort with these aeroplanes trailing. I suddenly saw what I thought were 2 aeroplanes breaking away from that, but they weren't trailing, and they came down towards Southend Pier, roughly, where I happened to be heading, and was at about 16,000 feet. Before I knew where I was looking at 2 aeroplanes, a gold and a silver, and they came towards me, and when they were quite a reasonable distance from me, they peeled off to my port side at great speed. It must have been a very closing speed, and then I turned my head again, and there was another one coming towards me, but much closer, in silver, with a bun on top and a bun underneath it. No sign of lights or anything like that, and I suppose it filled half my windscreen, shall we say. Difficult to judge that. And then when it got to that distance from me, it peeled off the right, to my port rather, its right. And of course at this stage I was quite dazed, and turned to follow it, and I couldn't. It was gone. And then the next thing I did, after I'd sort of got over not the bewilderment, but a bit of a shock of it all, I called the tower at North Weald and reported the incident, and I think that was about it. But of course there are lots of things about people saying, or that I said, if only I had had a gun sight up, I could have taken pictures. But of course, in the meteor race, you have to put the gun sight up. That takes time, and this whole thing happened in such a short space of time that wasn't actually possible.
But these were saucer shaped, weren't they, with a bun on top and underneath?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I was sort of bound by the Secrets Act then.
Yes.
We couldn't talk about it.
Yes.
And this, I suppose, the first thing about it really was the fact that the Flying Saucer Review came out, and he was the first editor.
Yes.
And so I think he's passed away, dear fellow.
He has, but we're pretty sure that it was passed on to the Prince Philip's equerry, which was Henry Chinnery.
Oh, well, yes, but of course that was a bit later. But
Right.
it was really came to me by the station commander at Northfield,
Yeah.
and he received a letter. It was passed on to Prince Philip by Chinnery. You're quite right.
Yes.
But the station commander then sort of there was no report, you see, because it wasn't allowed.
It's Richard speaking now. I just want to ask you, where do you think these objects came from, and who do you think they belong to?
Well, I'm jolly sure they don't belong to this earth. I've always had the attitude that you know, we're always looping things off and into space and looking at other planets, and if there are people in this wide thing above, they must be curious, because there's lots of action around England, and I really do believe that all I can say about the ones that I saw, they were friendly.
Right.
They didn't attack me anyway, or try and attack me
Right.
anyway. I've never seen anything like this in my life before. The thing is, John, that I'm now an old man, and it's still quite vivid in my mind, although it's rather difficult to record everything. But before you go,
Right.
I'd like to say this: whichever government, whenever, are very short-sighted about the services. I mean, cutting them down on one thing and the other, it's wrong. Anyway, there's nothing to do.
No, but I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
okay, I'll give you a shout tomorrow and let you know how I got on.
Thanks for calling.
No, thank you, James. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
But
Listening.
okay, bye.
Bye now.
Bye. Bye.
Prince Philip is known to have an interest in UFOs. Has he ever publicly commented that you know of?
No,
So it's kind of a closet interest.
Well, it's said that he did read Flying Saucer Review. Now, I don't know if he originally did read Flying Saucer Review, but I can tell you that Flying Saucer Review was requested by the Palace in the early days, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he actually read the stuff himself. But I think he had an interest, as indeed did many other people, including Lord Dowding, who was head of RAF Fighter Command in the Second World War, and also Lord Louis Mountbatten, who I met some years ago.
Okay. Maybe he's watching this now.
Maybe.
Some of the other stuff he may not be too happy with. My other programmes, in other words. All right, John.
We don't want to go there, Richard. Yeah.
Right, what we got next?
Another really exciting case was, again in 1954, was on the 21st of October. And I wonder, James Saladin says the 14th, but he's not sure about the 14th. And what would happen if, in fact, it had been perhaps a week later, and he may well have seen the UFO that was witnessed by Jesse Rostenberg.
I see.
Now, Jessie Rostenberg, which is page 141. We've been to see Jessie a few times, and originally she was interviewed by Shropshire UFO researcher Gavin Gibbons. Now, I never met Gavin. He passed away many years ago, and so did Wilfred Daniels from Staffordshire. But we traced Gavin's brother, Robin, and his wife Margaret, and they assisted us with some photographs of his brother and background information. But that was an exciting encounter when Jessie and her sons saw a saucer-shaped object hovering over the family farmhouse, and gazing out of the object with these beings.
They had skin like ours with very high foreheads, their features being in the lower part of their face, with shoulder-length hair, dressed in what looked like ski suits with a stern and forbidding expression on their face, wearing something resembling glass bowls over their heads with what looked like breathing apparatus.
That's right. There are many accounts within our books of beings, entities, aliens. But there are many accounts where the description is very similar. Some people refer to them as Nordics. Scandinavian features, long hair, golden hair, many sightings like that.
Yeah.
But she contacted the police, and I think it was 9 officers arrived at the house, and then somebody leaked it to the press, and I think there's some reference to hairy monsters from outer space in the newspaper a few days later. But she had some medical problems, and again I'm dragging this from my memory rather than reading it. But she went she was examined by a doctor, and he thought she might have been in close contact with some radioactive material.
Right.
But eventually her health was sorted out. But we again, the interesting part is that within a short space of time, I think it was probably half an hour or something, again it's in the book, there was a headmaster and a pupil from a school in Stafford that saw this machine, this really weird looking thing going over, making a clattering noise, because sometimes they're not all silent, saw this thing going over. Undoubtedly it was probably certainly connected with what Jessie had seen. But we can't say it was the same object, but sometimes it's difficult to believe that coincidences like that can happen.
All right, so couldn't have been blonde human beings in a secret military craft?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, I don't know. You're putting a suggestion to me. I mean, I don't know. I doubt it very much, because I believe that sightings of craft with occupants like that go back long before we were even flying.
The craft itself was corroborated by other witnesses?
The children corroborated it, yeah. Okay. And then, of course, not forgetting her husband, Tony, Dutchman by birth, he also witnessed something strange a few days later.
Paddy, I haven't read all of the books. I've read some of the first one, and I've sort of speed read it, and there's just case after case after case after case, and you can spot common threads, which are very fast vertical or horizontal departure, always glowing orange balls of light generally, and disc-shaped objects.
Right. Yeah.
Occasionally circular ground markings if they've landed, and other characteristics would be electrical problems with devices nearby, radios don't work, etc.
That's right.
Generally silent, but as you said, but not always.
On occasion, they all sorts of. I mean, Jessie was first alerted by the sound of what she likened as falling water, a whooshing noise. Now, we've come across other people who've heard a whooshing noise, and if again, Jessie said that just before it happened, she had a tickling sensation in her during the afternoon. She had a sensation in her nose, and as if she was catching a cold. Right. And again, individually. A case like that probably wouldn't stand on its own individual merits. You couldn't offer it as comprehensive evidence. But when you take hundreds of cases like that, and people that tell you the same thing, they don't embellish it. They tell you what they experienced, what they heard, and what they witnessed. And surely you can't discount that. I mean, there's something pretty strange out there, as indeed there always has been.
All right, John, we're going to go to another short break. After the break, we're going to be talking about a flying triangle in Tyneside in 1960. Welcome back. I'm talking to John Hanson about his series of encyclopedias which cover British UFO cases in chronological order from 1940. And we mentioned the case from 1960, which was a flying triangle over my part of the world, Tyneside. So tell us about this, John.
That's right. Well, first of all, I would like to mention that some years ago I came across a copy of a magazine called Orbit, which was in fact published by the Tyneside UFO Society, and Jean and Leslie Otley used to produce it from their house, and were assisted by other members. I eventually managed to get hold of their son, who gave me a photograph of the parents and also a write-up about UFOs in those days. And also I managed to get hold of the copies of Orbit, and amazingly speak to many people that were involved with it. And one of them was Alfred Miller from Consett, who sent me quite a bit of information about UFOs over the years, so thanks very much, Mr. Miller. But he was one of the first persons to cite, and this is in September 1960, 4 or 5 smaller lights with a single light following some distance behind, circling and changing formation as it flew silently south to north across the sky. And then as a result of various telephone calls made, we've got it here, Eileen Steele, John Booth and Jean Otley confirmed they had the lights under observation. And then according to them, that through binoculars, the 3 main lights, and I have to say, you know, I've looked at thousands of sightings over the years, and predominantly the 3 main lights are the most common feature about UFO sightings. Whether those 3 lights are in, if you like, a triangular shape, or whether they're one behind the other, or horizontal or vertical, but 3, I can never understand why there's only ever 3, except on other occasions people will see dozens. But the amount of times people said 3 lights forming the triangle, and I say on this occasion these lights were made up of a number of smaller lights, and they were moving at a height of less than 3,000 feet, and after completing a couple of circuits they moved off north. Now Mr. Leslie Otley, he was head of the group, coincidentally was giving a talk on UFOs that evening at the local Conservative club. He was informed, and as I say, the investigation start. The group telephoned the duty officer at the nearest RAF station, who told them that others had already telephoned them about this. 2 hours later they received a telephone call from RAF Fighter Command, who wanted details of the sighting, which was then ultimately passed on to the Air Ministry, and Mr. Gollard contacted the Mr. Otley and explained it away as being a military aircraft carrying out a routine air refueling exercise in the area at the time. The aircraft belonged to the United States Air Force. May I also say that there is no reason why the Royal Air Force stations in the area should have known about the exercise, and that the air defence of this country does not depend on the investigation by flight stations of events in the air above them. There is no possibility that Russian planes could do likewise. Well, in my opinion, it wouldn't have mattered if he said it was a flock of geese, because that's all that they have to do, is just provide it doesn't matter if it's silly explanation,
right?
Because
so
most people will
what about
that.
Noise in that case? Was it?
Well, these were completely silent.
Right. Yeah. Concert is where I used to have my studio, actually. So I know Concert.
Yeah.
Well,
as I say, hopefully I don't know if there's a copy here, but we do have, as you can see, there's a pile of magazines here, early magazines, and I think it's very important that people will be able to see a copy of the Orbit, which, if I remember rightly, all of those copies of Orbit can be read. They're at the Newcastle Library,
okay.
So they're all in there. But this is a typical example of a couple that produced all of this vast amount of information, and sadly, really, who knows about Orbit? Who knows about the Tyneside UFO Society?
So just to touch on triangular sightings, John. Am I right in thinking, I don't want to put words in your mouth, what's your assessment of the number of sightings of triangular craft objects over the decades? Has it, the numbers changed?
Most people, the word triangular UFO is a label, isn't it? And that was, that came about during the early 1980s, when a lot of so-called triangular craft was seen around Europe, particularly in the Belgium area. But triangular objects, whether they're triangular, apparently constructed objects in the sky during the daylight, or lights in the sky seen at night, go back to the 40s. I've got reports from pilots in the Second World and not forgetting the so-called Foo Fighters in the Second World War, when the airmen on both sides saw UFOs, and a lot of them actually described the UFOs as looking like flying Christmas trees.
Yeah, it's quite small. The Foo
quite
Fighters.
Small, triangular objects.
Right.
So I think triangular things go back many years. Triangular shaped objects, but
what about the black triangular craft that were witnessed in Belgium, and I've had a number of, well, for example, someone will see a bright light. I interviewed a guy the other day, or 3 bright lights, and then a solid object will then appear around the lights or within the lights.
That's right. There's been a number of sightings of separate individual lights followed, almost as if something's been created or something's behind the lights that is. Whether the lights are creating the object or the object is separate, but I know where you're coming from with that. I've spoken to many people who've seen similar things. I think, again, at the top of the head are 89 up in, I think it was Newcastle again. There was an absolutely excellent sighting from an engineer who saw one of these things go over. This sighting's from Suffolk. Mr. Frost from Hopton in Suffolk, these black triangular objects flew overhead, flew over his garden, and so many sightings of these black triangle objects. And of course, not forgetting Mr. Omar Fowler, you've interviewed yourself about the flying triangles seen over Derbyshire, where they fly majestically over the landscape. At a very slow speed.
I've had a number of, just to stay on the subject of flying triangles, I've had a number reported to me recently. So we're going to modern day now.
Right.
I know we're doing the history, but just to modern day, just for a second, of flying triangles in Lincolnshire now, which are completely silent, and the dynamics are incredible. They disappear, as if they're defying, as if they've got no inertia. They're just in and out like this now, and with lights at the corners, or one glowing light which
in the middle,
or
a glowing light,
or a light in the middle. Now, they're being sighted around populated areas.
These things, there is no doubt that the Victorians saw similar things.